Money Vikings, Money Viking G here. I got a very important one for you today as I share the latest on portfolio allocation from Vanguard and BlackRock. And this is critical information for those middle-class wealth builders. I am going to get some Dutch Brothers, though. I'm going to turn around and show you. I am going to get some Dutch Brothers afterwards. So that's my reward for making a video here in a few minutes. So let's get right into it. Let's drive around a little bit and we're going to get right into the situation here. Basically, there's some pretty shocking information has come out in the last week or so in terms of proper allocation, asset allocations for middle class wealth builders, okay? And what's shocking about it is that Vanguard is now saying that equities are not going to do very well over the next decade. And so that has to play into a middle-class wealth builder's strategy going forward. And so they shockingly, and I did find this shocking, and I don't totally agree with it, but maybe they'll end up being right. I don't know. They were saying go away from equities and more towards bonds. So I found that very interesting. The concept is that equities are basically highly valued or fully valued or overvalued at the moment. And a lot of that appears to have a lot to do with the AI hype. So that seems to have pushed equity valuations very high. Now, I don't think it's a time to panic. I don't think it's a time to sell everything or anything like that. But you do know that I like strategic portfolio allocation and making rational strategic moves under after taking in information, after thinking about your situation and making rational, not knee-jerk reactions to things, not like the sky's falling and I have to make some change right away. But it would maybe make some sense to trim some equity positions and to maybe beef up the bonds a little bit. But let me go a step further and explain something that's even more shocking. So BlackRock CEO Larry Fink said that the 60-40 portfolio is no longer the way to go going forward. And so the 60-40 portfolio, for those of you who don't know, it was 60% equity funds, so probably 60% the S&P 500 or other ETFs that are basically baskets of equities, followed by 40% bonds. So that's been a traditional portfolio. There's another step to this, and it has to do with your age. So the old Vanguard way was you would take your age minus 100. So basically, if you're 60, let's say you're 50 years old, minus 100 is 50. That would mean you're 50% equities and you're 50% bonds. But as you get older, you increase the bonds and you decrease the equities. So when you're 70, he's saying you do 70% bonds and 30% equities. So as you get older, you do less and less equities, you have less volatility, and you do more bonds. Finally, when you're 90 years old, you're going to be at, I guess, 90% bonds and 10% equities. Now, these are just rules of thumb. They all have to be taken with a grain of salt. They all have to be tailored to individuals. So here's the shocking part. So what did the BlackRock CEO say in terms of the 60-40 portfolio? Well, he went a different direction than Vanguard. He said that what you should now do is something like 40 or 50% equities, okay? Something like 20 to 30% bonds, and then he adds 20% of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. So that's extremely shocking going forward. But for those of us in the crypto space or have been following Bitcoin, it's not shocking. It actually makes a lot of sense. So I am thinking that Bitcoin, again, is a very strategic place to be going forward for middle class investors. Now, let me share a couple of recent thoughts on Bitcoin and some other things that we keep hearing, because I continue to research it and study it as I dollar cost average into it over time. And that's my basic middle class approach, is you find an affordable amount every couple of weeks, whether it's $100, $200, $300, whatever it is for you, for your income, and you're dollar cost averaging into it you're buying a block of it every couple of weeks. And so the idea is that you're going to beat inflation, you're going to grow wealth effectively, and you're going to preserve your buying and your purchasing power, because that is actually the name of this game over the long arc. You're trying to preserve purchasing power, so over time you're not losing ground, because that's what happens to most people. Most people over time, they work their arses off, as we know, in their job, and over time the value of the dollars that they work for continue to deplete and go down. It's a very sad situation. They've worked very hard for 40 years plus, and at the end of it, let's say they've saved or invested, and maybe they were able to come up with $500,000, $600,000, $700,000. Well, the problem is going forward for the next, maybe 20, 30 years of their life, hopefully they're healthy, they gradually lose purchasing power quite a bit until they, can't go on those vacations that they dreamt of, or the cruise they dreamt of, or they can't do the upgrade of their house that they really wanted, or they can't help their children or their grandchildren the way they wanted to. And, I think that's a goal of most people. And that's the whole point of our channel. That's the idea, is that we're trying to show these ideas and illustrate these ideas that are going to help everybody. I truly believe that when we're all stronger, it makes us individually stronger. So I do believe in that. So with Bitcoin as of late, there's talk right now of tops at 150, 160. We're not there yet. I think it's around 117, 116, whatever. But I don't know if that's the way to look at it. And I wouldn't necessarily look at it as a get-rich-quick thing. I mean, it's actually never been a get-rich-quick thing. For those who have been invested or been purchasing Bitcoin, they've been doing it now for 10 plus years. So that's not get-rich-quick. But has it paid off? Yeah, it's paid off really well. But I still believe we're in the beginning. If Bitcoin ends up in the year 2027 at $1 million a coin, you might be very happy that you dollar cost averaged $50,000 into it, because at that time, that could be $500,000 worth of value in purchasing power that you wouldn't have had, that would not have grown like that. So that's very important to keep in mind. I'm also a big fan, you can go down the rabbit hole on crypto, you can go down the rabbit hole on Bitcoin. I'm a big fan of keeping things simple, as you guys know, if you're a long-term reader of our blog, truewealth.moneyvikings.com, or if you've watched any of our videos over the years, you know that I'm a keep it simple kind of guy. So I'm trying to keep this very straightforward in terms of wealth building. Obviously anything can become complicated exponentially. We can go down many rabbit holes with crypto, but you have to ask yourself at the end of the day these big questions. What is money? What is fiat currency money? What is a dollar? These are all social human constructs. There's not a dollar in nature. In nature, we had to live off the land. We had to live by hunting and gathering. It was survival of the fittest. In our modern society, we have a different system. You have to live off of money, and that's the system we've created. Now, there's a path off that matrix, if you want to call it that. We can take the path off the matrix. It's probably a difficult path. I've watched shows about it. You can move to Alaska and you can live off the land and you can hunt and gather every day. That's a choice. It's a choice we all have to make. There's another path called Bitcoin and investing. And there's a way to teach people basic rules of investing that are not get rich quick, that are not overly risky, do not put them, in harm's way, but actually build their ability and their purchasing power over time, make them healthier, wealthier, and stronger. And that's the whole point that we're trying to get at. So with that, thanks a lot for watching, guys. Leave some comments. I'd like to know what your portfolio allocation is as of today. What do you think about these new ideas of portfolio allocation? Does this make any sense? Does the Vanguard thing make sense? Does the BlackRock thing make sense? Are they just manipulating us? Are these just tricks? I don't know. I mean, I do know that you have to invest in order to get ahead. It's the only way for middle-class earners. But how do we do it in a way where we are maximizing our returns, but we're also being very thoughtful about our risk tolerance going forward? Those are the questions we have to ask. All right, guys, I'm off to a Dutch Brothers now. I'll see y'all later. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. Bye.